right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the APAC Hybrid Cloud Kopi Hour. So this is the new live streaming show we've been doing in APAC, and this is our second what I call beta episode. And by beta, I mean we're still kind of trying it out. We're seeing what kind of formats we like and what kind of guests we can get and what we can do. And I also said Kopi Hour. I said this last time. I didn't say coffee hour. So Kopi is and I know our guests, some of them are quite familiar with it, is a very common type of coffee that you find in Southeast Asia. And it's also very popular in Singapore. So we figured we would stay true to our company headquarter roots and name it after that. So I am August Simonelli. I am a technical marketing manager here at Red Hat. I work in Sydney. But today I'm coming to you live from Detroit. Yep, that's Detroit behind me. Because today is the KubeCon NA 2022 APAC recap show. So I'm not actually in Detroit, obviously. That wouldn't be aligned with what we're trying to do in our show. So I'm actually here in Sydney. But what I do have is 3 guests who have been to Detroit and who attended the show. And so I thought we'd bring them on and we'd have a chat about what it was like to be in Detroit at KubeCon and coming from, in this case, ANZ. But let's go through and meet the guests. So I want to start with who we brought, who you probably met last time if you're a long-time streamer on our show. First is Dev Shambag. Dev is a principal architect down in Melbourne. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Dev.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be back here. Dev Shambag, principal architect with the customer success team here in ANZ. Work with our telco customers in the region, and glad to be here.
Excellent. Thanks, Dev. So Dev's a regular because now we've had 2 shows and he's been on them both. Yeah. Next up, we have someone who's newer to Red Hat. We have James Blair. James is a specialist solution architect in New Zealand. So say hey, James.
Hey team. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. So I'm based in the Wellington office in New Zealand, and helping customers understand Red Hat technology and how it applies to them. And yeah, a couple of months in and having a great time so far.
Excellent. So James, have you ever had Kopi? Have you ever been up to Singapore and actually indulged in that wonderful beverage?
I have not, although I think we might be heading that way early next year. So I have to add that to the list. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And so I asked you that because I know our next guest, who is Nick Satya, who is down in Canberra, and he's part of the TME team. He knows his Kopi. So, Nick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and explain why I said that?
Yeah, my name is Nick Satya. I'm part of the global telco media and entertainment organization, and I focus pretty much on telco as I have all my life, helping the Red Hat account teams and the telco companies around the Asia Pacific region as needed for Red Hat products. And as August says, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with Kopi, although it's not my favorite coffee, but yeah, I spent almost 4 years in Singapore in the early 2000s, and I had quite a bit of it with lots of good friends there.
Yeah. Every time I went up there, I got to know it, and there was like all these different types, but I would have this one with like condensed milk. That was like so tasty, and then there was weird bread you'd get with it as well.
Oh yes, yeah, the condensed milk on bread, on toast.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. So we've got these great guests, and again, what we're going to talk about today is KubeCon North America, which happened in Detroit between October 24th and 28th. So I have some details about the show. So as you know, KubeCon happens twice a year, North America and Europe. And previous to the North America show this year, it was in, I think, Valencia, Spain in Europe, and then Los Angeles. So they've had a couple of in-person shows since the pandemic and since that shut it down. But I believe Detroit was one of the biggest. There were 7,500 attendees, and then the same amount tuning in virtually with the kind of the numbers they're touting. So we're looking at around 15,000 folks, which I think, Dev, you might have been at the one in San Diego pre-pandemic.
Yep.
And that was pretty massive, right?
Yeah, that had almost 12,000 people in person attending and a lot more virtually as well. So that was a big one. But even this one, going up to this, I did not feel a lot of difference There were so many people. Everyone was, really enjoying coming back together in person. So this was great as well.
Well, and what I also noticed about the show is that there were like a lot of not partner events, like extra day events. There was like Con, Cloud Security Con, WASM Day, OpenShift Commons. There's all these different days going on that were happening there. And I think that was before the actual show, right? So they were the day before. I don't know if you made it to one.
That was on the Monday, Tuesday before the official KubeCon started on Wednesday. I made it to Monday afternoon, which was the sort of telco half day. It wasn't a full day, and on the Tuesday we did a full GitOps day, which was quite good.
That's right. So that was a telco and GitOps, or just an actual...
No, there was a telco. There was a telco co-located event on the Monday afternoon, half a day, and as well as independent GitOps day on the Tuesday. Yeah, but that was for the full day.
So I know that there were a lot of sessions. So I actually put together. So there is the CNCF has actually published the playlist, and so I was able to start watching the videos and kind of get a sense of what kind of stuff was happening, and they're organized by each day and all that kind of stuff. So you could get a sense of just how big it was. And then I think next year it's scheduled for, I think it's coming up in Amsterdam in April, and then in Chicago, I think.
Chicago.
So looking at some of the things that were there, I spoke with some of the folks in my team who were there, and they said one of the major themes was security, was talking about supply chain security, that everyone has a supply chain story. Obviously, Red Hat has one as well. Did you, James, I don't know if you heard much about that when you were there, if you were seeing a bit going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually went to the 2 days Cloud Native Security Con, Monday, Tuesday. And day one was mostly focused on supply chain, around software bill of materials and image provenance and CVEs over time and some of the popular images. There was a lot. That was pretty much the main focus. I have to confess, on day two, I did actually step out of the main talks and attend the Capture the Flag, just because they're really awesome fun. But day one for me at SecurityCon was mostly fixated on supply chain.
Supply chain, yeah. And Dev, I assume you saw much of the same.
Yeah, I think security was a big event, specifically in KubeCon. I'm just reading out some of the numbers when you mentioned this. So in one of the keynotes on KubeCon day one, there was this particular presentation that spoke about just security focus. So they did an analysis of the top 165 public containers on Docker Hub, and basically they came out with vulnerabilities. So they said average number of vulnerabilities in each of these was 273 vulnerabilities on each of the public containers, and that only represented 20% which were deemed high and critical. And the average number of packages per container is 34. So that gave us, that gave everyone kind of, a landscape of, how important security has been in this whole cloud native landscape.
Probably one of the things that really stood out to me at that keynote as well was the actual increase from the previous year. So that they looked at those same 165 images over time, and the picture didn't look any better this year. It was a bit worse. So it'll be really interesting to see another 12 months down the track if we can really get on top of that and get that number down.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And does that challenge the telco industry as well, Nick?
Of course it is. Although the telco industry is a little bit more closed in terms of when you look at the communications and 5G images that they're using, they come directly from the various vendors, the network equipment providers that do it. But it's those stats definitely highlight the real risk out there, and the need to be very careful where you're sourcing your images from and who's actually publishing them and maintaining them, because they may not be intentionally vulnerable, but if they're not maintained, then the vulnerabilities would just increase. obviously, as we've seen through the years.
So our customers bringing images down, and then they're going to have to rescan them and make sure they're safe. And are you not just KubeCon? Are you seeing with your customers that they're having multiple operating system Windows containers in there and Linux containers? How does that kind of spread out?
Well, with my customers, it's primarily Linux type-based containers for network functions. But there's multiple. I mean, there's the scanning and security, procedures and everything in constructing those images by those NEPs. But also, we provide with our own registries, etc., within Red Hat, whether it's online or the on-premise quay, where we do have that does its own scanning as well as having our own security scanning tools as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so before we get too off track and stop talking about KubeCon, I'll reel that back in. And another area I wanted to talk about when you mentioned keynotes was one of our Red Hatters did a keynote for the CNCF where he told a story of Red Hat working with Lockheed Martin. And Lockheed had a specific problem they needed to solve. And so we began working with them. And that actually led to a Red Hat product, which is called the Red Hat Device Edge. And I want to kind of cover that a little bit. But the session was really cool that Nick Barcett did, because he talked about the transformational way that we took a customer use case and it turned into a productized solution. And excuse me, he called back to the OpenStack days when we sort of did that, Nick, where we began working with telco vendors and they were using their old $1 million pieces of hardware. And you and I used to, I remember in the early days, Dev as well, we would be in these telephone exchanges looking at these boxes that were, full of cobwebs, so to speak, but were very important. But the evolution through VNFs to CNFs, and that now today, most 5G is running on containers. Correct. And so that transformational message is now applying to edge a lot more, which I'm sure you're seeing in that telco space.
Well, exactly. As you said, 5G is primarily software-based solutions running on container-based Kubernetes all the way to the edge. So, you could be looking at a North American telco having, 40, 50,000 sites where they would be running Kubernetes in some form, in size as well. Primarily would be, edge. Co-located with antennas and things like that, but there will be Kubernetes and CNFs and everything all the way to that edge.
And it's amazing, right? Because who would have thought when we were standing in a telephone exchange in Melbourne, what was that? How many years ago was that? 8 years ago? That this would just be the de facto. And I think that's what happened with Lockheed, right? So they had a need to, excuse me, load up a drone to survey these vast areas, but there was nothing to stick in the drone. And they want to use Kubernetes, and they want to use, a very small distribution. And that actually led to us working with them. And there were people in my team who were assisting in engineering and all that to create Red Hat Device Edge and this really, really cool thing called Microshift. So, I don't know if any, I can go into it, but if anyone wants to share a little bit about what they know about RHD and Microshift, talk a bit about it. Otherwise, I'll cover it. Have you played with it? Have you tested it? Or are we all still kind of learning?
No, it's still pretty new to me. I mean, I've been aware of it, but also been very busy. It's definitely on my list of things to, to be researching and looking into.
Yeah.
One thing
go ahead, Dev.
One thing I definitely call out that, working with customers, a lot of customers are now keen at looking at, how they can make use of the, far edge sites, basically, power constrained, resource constrained environments. And I think Red Hat Device Edge plays a massive role there.
Yeah, James.
I was just going to jump in. I have to say I've been tinkering with classic edge device, the phone, in this case a Linux phone, running Fedora and installing Microshift on that. It's a few little hoops you have to jump through just there at the moment because of the device specifically.
Yeah.
But very, very cool.
So I think that actually is a great little entry point for me. So I want to be clear what RHDE is, Red Hat Device Edge and Microshift. So Red Hat Device Edge is actually a RHEL distribution. So it's a RHEL for edge distribution that uses RPM OS tree. So you're using an AB type OS so that you can do upgrades very easily and very cleanly. But it's not it's not Microshift. It's its own thing. And what it does is it actually enables you or allows you to run RPMs on there. It runs KVM, so you could run virtual machines directly on there. It allows you so you could package your app up as an RPM or in a VM, or to run a very small OpenShift-like distribution called Microshift. So inside Red Hat, we kind of talk about Microshift, and it seems like it's all of our HDE, but this thing is massively functional. So, but what's so cool about Microshift is while it's not a full OpenShift distribution, right? It's missing some of the APIs. It doesn't have OLM and stuff like that. It is a binary. It's a single, I believe, James, a single binary that you can move around. Yeah. That runs like 4 little pods or something. It's really lean.
Yeah, in comparison to a full fat OpenShift deployment, it's tiny, and if you've got a small device, just a couple of CPU, 4 CPU, 2 CPU, a couple of gigs of RAM, that's all you need. It's going to work.
So it's certainly a neat one. And I guess what I learned, and I kind of knew because from my OpenStack days, but these big shows, there aren't actually that many vendor announcements. So the fact that Red Hat was able to share that, and it's not a GA product, it's still tech preview, so it's still coming.
But on the plus side, the fact that it's not a sort of a vendor event, was quite good, was quite refreshing in that you were not getting that marketing sale pitch to you all the time. It was, you had engineers from every vendor you can imagine, but they were there representing their projects and talking about their projects and the technology and everything, which was really good.
Yeah, and I kind of want to look more at that as well. I want bringing it back to KubeCon. What are you looking to find? So you guys decided to, fly 15,000 kilometers across an ocean to middle of America. What are you hoping to find when you go to a KubeCon event? Nick, you revealed that obviously there. Are you hoping to see the big splashy announcements? What were you each seeking as you went over there? What were you hoping to find? And we just kind of go around the room. So.
Having just coming out of COVID and 2.5 years of lockdown, I've been in my team for the entire time of COVID. I joined it in May 2020. So I hadn't seen any of my teammates or anyone in person. So one of the things that I really looked forward to in going there was to meet some of my teammates, meet people that I've been talking to virtually for the last 2.5 years, and also get to understand better the Kubernetes upstream communities and how they work, how they think. Because prior to this role, I was like yourself involved more in OpenStack, where we attended. I forgot which one it was, the OpenStack Summit in Barcelona with you. Which contrasting it, that to me, that one was becoming a little bit too commercialized, whereas that's why it was nice to see the KubeCon was still very independent of any specific vendors. I mean, obviously they all had their booths in the showcase, and it was great to visit and t-shirts like the ones here.
I was going to say we'll talk about that in a minute, but yeah, James, why don't you what were you looking to find? You're new to Red Hat, so you're a vendor. I don't know what you did before, but you're a vendor now. What were you hoping to find over there?
So I should say this was the first in-person KubeCon for me. Gone to a couple of the virtual instances beforehand. To me, KubeCon's kind of all about the people behind the technology. I wanted to catch up with some old friends that I hadn't seen in years. Meet some new friends. And actually, we were talking about the co-located events earlier. I probably need to give a shout out to the Cloud Native Rejects event on the Sunday. So if anyone doesn't know about that, it's usually a much, much, much smaller event, maybe 1 or 2 days before the main week. And you can go along, and any of the talks that potentially have been rejected from the main conference, they get like a second chance to be presented there. And I actually on that Sunday caught up with some really old friends, which was awesome. And just throughout the rest of the week as well. So just it's about that kind of weird mix of the people that are actually doing the stuff behind the scenes on the projects and those relationships that you build out there. It's about the people. Yeah,
definitely about the people.
Yeah. So Dev, right, as a consultant, you're working with the technology every day. As an architect, you're designing with it. What were you looking for?
Like everyone else, I think networking was top of mind. So just being in person, meeting new people, kind of networking with them. That was the key motivation behind me going to KubeCon. The other reason, and top of priority, was just talking to some of the project maintainers. So I know a lot of booths were there, where vendors were represented, but there's one corner as well where all the projects are represented, and I think that's a great place to be. You can talk to the project maintainers, the engineers behind, all the cool stuff that everyone is using and everyone's talking about, and you can go up to them and ask them questions, and they're it's really cool because if you don't know a technology, or if you don't know a particular project and what they're doing, they're really happy to show that to you. If you think about it, just 2 years into the whole lockdowns, we were all doing this on Slack, so we had different
Yeah.
communities reaching out to each other in Slack. Just putting a name to a face, that is brilliant, right? And you make those connections, face to face, and if you have a question, you can throw it at them, and help our customers in the end. So I think that was another a really cool thing that I thought I took out from that. And in the end, it's just just meeting other engineers from other teams, and even from end users, or customers, and seeing what their challenges are.
Yeah.
So that I'll kind of sum it up. Yeah, those are the three things that I took on.
But I have to say, we need to work a lot harder, I think, to get them to hold one in our region in Asia, Oceania and Asia.
Yeah.
Because a 30-hour trip for me there and 34 hours coming back was pretty tough.
I was wondering, and especially post-pandemic, right? I mean, like we've all been, as Dev was saying, we've been, just chatting, it's slacking and whatever we're using. And to just get things back together is just such a valuable thing. I don't know if they'll do that. I mean, if you remember, there was an OpenStack summit in Sydney, but then I guess the reverse happens, right? It's very hard for everyone to come down to us. So
I remember back in 2019, there were Kubernetes regionals that were happening, and there was a regional. I think it might have been Sydney, and that was a great event. I mean, it would be awesome if maybe we can get some of those regional CNCF events kicking off again. Yeah.
Another, I mean, along with all those little events, was OpenShift Commons that was happening in Detroit as well. I don't know if any of you were able to make it, but that's kind of a neat thing where I know Diane and the team, they move that event around. It's a free event, and it allows Red Hat to kind of have that same less marketing, less product in the face, but more the people behind it, but some roadmaps and stuff. And I know I'm always saying to her, oh, bring it here. Whether it be Australia or Singapore, it doesn't matter, but bring it out to APAC to get those shorter flights. Also for that same exact purpose.
Would have been nice to attend it. Unfortunately, it clashed with our GitOps Day on the Tuesday.
Right.
So
that's what I was wondering, right? So with the logistics of the event, right, there's things like capture the flag. I want to hear more about that. But you've got all, I mean, there's like WebAssembly Day. I mean, that's very specific. So GitOps Day, I'm sure, would have been big. But how do you pick and choose what to visit? And like, do you think those smaller conferences overlapping work? I mean, you need it because everybody's there together. But does the format work?
I'll go first. I think it's difficult. I mean, at this time we had GitOpsCon, we had SecurityCon as well, and I was kind of keen on doing both. But it's difficult to choose. So yes, but I think the communities kind of realize, some of the projects are quite growing, or some of the and they want to carve it out separately. It's a good thing as well. So
and you never know. I mean, as they grow bigger and bigger, they might have their own dedicated.
It makes sense, right? And some are obviously very niche, and that's going to stay that way. I mean, so that does make sense.
But it certainly does help having them co-located in terms of budgeting and travel and things like that, where people can attend multiple events at the same with the same sort of travel costs.
You do get a bit of a kind of like a critical mass sort of thing going on with just a hub of people sort of buzzing around the events all at the same venue, which is really nice. But on the flip side, it can be tricky to choose, and I think there are a couple of the big ones, as Dev was saying. I think security, and there's one or two others that are splitting out, I think, for next year.
Observability.
Observability, yeah, cool. So we'll see how those go. Yeah.
Right. And so are they, I don't know enough about it, but are they having them completely at a different time? Because especially for people where we are, the costs are just enormous. Like Nick is saying, you can't go to Observability Con in Seattle and then 2 weeks later hit Security Con in Orlando, right? We don't have that flexibility like the Americans or even the Europeans might have.
I think
Yeah.
the existing structure kind of worked for me. I decided to go there independently just because I thought it was worth the investment. But to answer your question, August, SecurityCon is being held next year in February, as far as I understand. So they are kind of splitting.
Okay. So beyond the techie events, you mentioned Capture the Flag. What was things like the show floor like, the swag, the feel? I know AWS had a big booth. Tell me some stories. Like, I mean, I love going to those things and it's like, can I get one of those shirts? Can I get one of those? And I know it's about the tech. I get it. But the marketing part is fun. What was it like? Whoever wants to run with that. Nick, I mean, you're proudly wearing the shirt. So.
Well, yeah, but Dev and I had to wait for the last day before we were allowed to take anything from our booth, being Red Hatters.
Fair enough.
But our booth was pretty well attended from what I was seeing. I was going in and out in between presentations. We actually had a dedicated people team or human resource team for other companies that were actively talking to people and recruiting for certain positions as well to help them along, as well as having, our engineers and authors of some of our books that were there together, with their the books that they were giving away. So that was well attended. Obviously the bigger vendors like Cisco and AWS and everyone had some pretty big booths. I was impressed with Cisco's they were giving away hoodies, and I don't know exactly what they were printing on them, but God, those queues never ended, so I never actually got one of those. So that was impressive, where those queues lasted for 3 days. And there was actually decent coffee inside the showcase. Which, being an Australian, you're always looking for decent coffee, especially in America. The first thing I Googled when I landed there on Saturday evening is there a local coffee roasting place? And I found one actually in between the event and my hotel, which was pretty good coffee.
What about you guys, James? James, Dev, what do you think?
So I have to confess, this is also a shirt from the event, from the booth. But yeah, it looked like the Red Hat booth hummed along pretty well. I think just in terms of the venue, it was maybe less than ideal having like the food down on a separate level compared to where the solutions sort of center was. I think that kind of took away a little bit of the foot traffic. But yeah, obviously the sticker collections through the roof. It was a great chance to be able to walk around and chat to some people, and yeah.
And I have to admit, Detroit was never really on my list of places that I wanted to visit. But
that was my next question, and especially for you, Dev, because I know you've got family and stuff. What do you think of Michigan, Detroit? Go on, Nick. Yeah.
But I'm glad I got the opportunity to go there. You heard all these horror stories from Canadians across the river and from Americans, from experience from 5 or 10 years ago about safety issues and things like that. But to be honest, surprisingly, within the downtown city, I walked around all the time. Not too late at night, but definitely up to 9, 10 p.m. And I never really felt any sense of safety issues or anything like that, and really nice food. I really enjoyed the experience. I'm glad I went there.
Yeah, it certainly lives up to the Motor City name. I saw a lot of massive trucks and beautiful cars, EVs, on the roads. So that was fun. The weather was great as well. I mean, I think here back in Melbourne, it was raining like cats and dogs, but it was nice and sunny. I got up to a couple of runs in the morning as well. That was great. The food was awesome. Nick and I were queuing up, the coffee places every now and then, just trying to keep ourselves awake because there were so many awesome sessions. All in all, I think very safe place to visit. We did not have any issues. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely.
What about you, James? I mean, have you been to the US before?
No, first time over to the US for me. And I guess you have sort of preconceived notions, kind of like Nick was saying, around what Detroit might turn out to be. But I was really impressed with the, that kind of downtown area it's really lovely. Managed to go out to an NBA game on Wednesday night.
Oh, nice.
That was just an awesome experience. I mean, I haven't been to anything like that before. On the day we were leaving, actually on the Saturday, went to the Detroit museum and the main library. There's some awesome places to go and visit there.
I mean, it was evident around the city that they're, rebuilding the city. There was a lot of, empty business offices, and some of them have been sort of like keeping the fascia and rebuilding them internally. But there seems to be a lot of investment going in there now, and definitely changing the character of the city. Like I said, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, no, Nick and I were talking before. I mean, I was in Detroit 20 years ago for work, and it was a very different city. I think they had just won the Super Bowl, not won the game, but had won hosting the Super Bowl. So they were building Ford Field downtown, which you would have seen down there. It's a beautiful stadium, but it's old now. And I stayed out on East Jefferson, and there was, I was at a little office, and they kept saying I would walk across to my hotel, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing? It's not safe." And it was safe. It was fine. But that it's had that stigma for a long time. I know, Nick, you said your old employer, what was it?
I mean, we've heard of people actually getting shot from my old employer, where they would try and walk back to the hotel after hours. I mean, we're talking, 10, 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
Being in the wrong place at the wrong time, obviously. And, hadn't even more recently being warned by, like I said, ex-Canadians and ex-Americans that were close by, and which really had that picture from quite a while back. But, as I said, downtown city, I didn't feel any issues at all. I'm sure, like every other big American city, there's certain streets or areas you don't want to go to.
Yeah.
But definitely downtown where we were, it was quite pleasant. It was nice, actually. Nice character to the city as well. It's not your standard high-rise, sort of towering city. It's got a lot of character as well, from the 50s and 60s when it was built.
Yeah, no,
heaps of new street art propping up as well. There was a sort of a 15-20 minute ride around the monorail that you could take around downtown, and awesome street art popping up around the place. It was really cool. They actually had the monorail decorated with the CNCF KubeCon kind of branding as well, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the weather, like Deb said, the weather really put it out for us. I went with half my bag full of jackets and jumpers, thinking I'll need them, and I think it was like 22 degrees for the first 3 days, 4 days, and then it was still in the high teens the other days. Just a light jacket was enough. Light jumper.
That's good. I mean, Dev.
I was just going to say something I found really cool was, to look up the other side of the river and find another country.
Yes,
that was really cool. Just even, you could see Canada, right across the river.
Just seeing that Canadian flag, waving in the wind across the river. That's pretty cool.
Well, the photo that you've got behind you, it's probably taken from the Canadian side.
I'd say so. So when I went, I had a rental car because I had to go up to like some Comp USA or something to buy parts. I mean, I was looking after Windows machines, and I was able then to drive across the bridge drive south into Canada. And I thought that was just insane. How can you be in America and drive south into Canada? And obviously I'm from the US. I grew up in Colorado. So I'd never been to Detroit, but it was really kind of unique to be able to do that, and the casino was over there, and it was kind of different. I don't know if you guys got a chance to go into Canada, but it is a funny thing with that overlap with these two cities and how they look at each other like that.
Although we did have dinner with a friend from another vendor that one night, and he actually had to stay over at the casino across in Canada because he booked it really late. He was only coming for a couple of nights, and the prices in Detroit was so high that it was cheaper for him to stay across the river because he was Canadian and catch, even pay $60 or $100 for a taxi each way. It would still have been cheaper.
Yeah. At one point in the afternoon when we were on a break, Nick and I were just, by the river, and we saw a boat on the river, and we were kind of discussing, which side it is on. And to that, I realized I think we need to tame the engineer in us to kind of, go into the details.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I guess, I mean, and again, we're focused on KubeCon. Was it worth it? Right. So you've gone that far. It sounds like it was, but kind of give me a bit of a summary of all the travel and all that experience. What are your kind of top 3 takeaways from attending this KubeCon? Not just events in person. I think we all know they're needed, but I'll start with you, James. What, being over there, put you on the spot. What are, and I don't mean technical things necessarily, but what were the kind of those top things you took away from being over there?
I always find, and it was like this with the regionals, these kind of events, they kind of like re-energize some of my kind of passion around open source and the community. And actually, one of the highlights for me was heading along to one of the special interest groups for Kubernetes infra. They talked about needing some help with migrating off an old, GCP-based container registry to a new container registry for all the Kubernetes, standard images. And I actually later that night, the passion was flowing. I jumped in and raised a few pull requests for a few projects to get that change done. And yeah, I don't know. I just, in a nutshell, I think those kind of events, they just re-energize me in a way and kind of reinforce for me that I really want to be heading over to the next one, Amsterdam, in April. I'll do my best to get there. So
yeah, it's really worth it, right? Because not only do you see people in your network, but you remember the tech. You get, and Dev touched on this, and I'll give you a chance in a sec, Dev. But yeah, you get right back to that face of the tech, of the people behind it, because the last few years have been, so separating. But even when you could visit, even before that, just to be right there with the people in the tech is really neat. It's a neat story. So yeah, Dev, what about you? What do you think?
I think for me, it was more, we live far away from this, and sometimes we are really focused on ANZ or APAC, and just to be able to go, to the completely different region and get perspective of what customers are doing, how engineers are solving different problems. There were a few projects that I didn't even know existed, so that's kind of reckoning, and that's what I enjoy, and that kind of keeps me on my toes to learn things, to seek out new things. That's what I took away from it. So what the investment.
Yeah. And Nick?
And I mean, I agree with James. It definitely energizes you, especially after being locked up for so long. Particularly for me, being remote from I'm in a global team, so I'm the only one in the region from my team. So being able to talk to them, relax, have a drink, have a meal with them was really good. And with respect to the projects, I've been working closely with a lot of the GitOps staff myself recently, with some of the projects I've been working with, and also being part of a global telco team, talking to customers in the US and in Canada and in Asia and everywhere, and being able to meet some of them in person and in a relaxed environment like that was quite good. Being able to go out to dinner with the customers and some of our colleagues from the US, I found that really good. The travel, it was challenging, but I think worth it at the end. I wouldn't want to be doing it to the West Coast US 2 or 3 times a year, but definitely this time around it was worth the effort.
So that got me thinking. So did you run into customers from North America and Europe? I know that, but did anyone from APAC make it over? I mean, did you see any of your own, all 3 of you, did you see any of your own customers or even just local representation from, I mean, we're ANZ, but from the region?
Not my own customers, but I think that was with me. We did have lunch. You just go down at the lunch area and sit down, and there was a couple of Australians from one of the banks in Melbourne, I believe.
That's great.
They were talking to us. So, there was definitely Australians there.
And I have to give a mention to my friends from II Co-op. Used to be from Tauranga. One of them's just moved to Wellington. Caught up with a few of them over there. So it was just awesome to see other Kiwis making the mission over as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know. I mean, if we'll get better attendance when these events are in places like San Diego, like Dev, when you were there, in 2019, did you find there were, I would assume, proportionally more people from APAC, ANZ than now, or not?
Yeah, definitely. I think in 2019 we had a lot of representation from the APAC side as well. This time around, very few. Like Lick mentioned, we bumped into one of our customers from a bank from Australia. But other than that, a lot of the representation, especially from Red Hat, was from North America.
Yeah. Right, that's interesting. And I guess that's the other thing about these conferences is they're also a crossroads for customers to if they can make it, or to actually see how their colleagues or their competitors and stuff are doing things other ways or other places, but in a very technical way, not at a vendor conference, but to go over there as an engineer from a bank and see what other engineers from banks in other countries are doing. And I think, the more opportunities we have to do that, the better the end products get, the better we use the technology to make things good.
Yeah, there was some of the talks I really enjoyed were from some of the, I think Adobe did quite a few on deploying Kubernetes at large scale, looking at the security, user security, group security, authentication, authorization, and as well as all these other aspects of such large deployments, which I found really useful. Don't quite relate to telco, but certainly give me good ideas for me personally. But I'm sure for other enterprises, like a bank or a financial institution, that would have been very useful.
Yeah. So that leads me to ask as well for the other guys, any other favorite sessions? And you can say capture the flag, James. I still want to hear about that. So maybe tell me about capture the flag, but any other great, sessions that stood out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the CTF, it was, you're dumped into an environment, and you'll have this sort of hint of a scenario, and you're trying to unpick perhaps what the attacker has done, or what pathways they've followed, maybe what sort of CVEs and things they've used to get to various pivot points. I'll say I got about halfway. It was really hard. But it's still, you learn a lot, trying to dig through some of that, and it's good to keep yourself on your toes and challenge yourself. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. One of the sessions actually that really was just awesome for me. I've been hearing a lot about eBPF, extended Berkeley packet filter, and particularly in relation to monitoring and threat detection, that sort of thing, but not really from a taking action sense. And there was just an awesome talk around using eBPF to dynamically vertically scale pods, which was pretty awesome. I've got to give it to the presenters there. We've had horizontal scaling with throwing more pods at things for so long now in Kubernetes, but being able to on the fly, as soon as a certain process executes inside a pod, dynamically within sub-second, scale up the limits on that pod. Very cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Another topic which was really gaining popularity was discussions around green power, being able to manage, to understand the sources of your power, being able to calculate the CO2 emissions per process or per pod based on where you're sourcing your power from. Whether it's from a coal-fired station or a gas-fired station or a nuclear or hydro station, whatever. And there's a lot of research and a lot of work being done in being able to come up with CO2 emissions for companies. And I believe there's certain standards that are coming in, at least in the US and Europe, where publicly listed companies would need to start reporting their CO2 footprint, including what they may be using, say, in terms of processing on a cloud.
So you're saying that they're able to calculate how much energy they're burning CO2 based on how the data center is being powered right up to the pod.
Correct. How they power, down to getting telemetry from the actual host themselves on idle time, and what the CPUs are burning and everything. actually, there was an interesting concept where I forgot the exact numbers, but one of my colleagues, William Caban, he was discussing how, people consider, sort of spinning hard disks to be a lot more power inefficient than, say, an SSD. But when you look at the manufacturing costs of it, it's at the other extreme where the spinning disk is so much more efficient in in its manufacturing process. And as companies need to start reporting their the CO2 footprints, I believe in 2024 in Europe, where they need to take into consideration the whole CO2 footprint of everything they're using, including the disks that they're using within
the whole thing.
not just the the power consumed while used, but also in the manufacture of those components.
Yeah,
That was one of my favorite topics and presentations. So basically, William Caban and another Red Hatter who presented, and this was more towards how do we take CNCF projects, open source projects, and combine them together, and basically, use machine learning models to improve, the whole, the deployment, and kind of learn from them, take observability data. That was just amazing. They were comparing coal versus nuclear versus gas, and all the numbers. It was fantastic.
But there were some other interesting statistics where they were saying that a base idle machine that they were running was burning 460 kilowatts. Watts just idle. So, and when you start tuning your processes and everything, there's no need to do any tuning until you actually go beyond that level, because you're not going to gain anything because you're burning that anyway, just being idle. So, you've got a certain envelope of performance available to you without actually using any more power than you're already consuming just with a machine being idle. And as Dev said, using AI to, for you to be able to say, well, this service needs to be within this CO2 envelope. And then depending on the time of day and everything, with AI and ML, to be able to, with intent-based, scheduling and planning, to be able to move processes between computes to keep the compute resources within the data center, within the cluster, at a certain more efficient level to try and maximize your, or reduce your CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
So I've got a question that immediately pops to mind. I didn't manage to catch that session, so I think I'll have to go back and hit that one when it comes up on YouTube. Was there a mention on CPU architecture and the impact that has? Like, I imagine ARM would probably stack up a lot nicer on those metrics, perhaps than AMD 64, x86.
No, to be honest, no. I didn't come any comparisons of sort of CPU architectures. It was more focused on being able to collect the telemetry and be able to report it. Because as I said, there's a lot of legislation coming through, especially in the US and Europe, where companies would have to be able to start reporting it. And there was 3 categories. I forgot, there were 1, 2, and 3. And I think 3 was the strictest, where you actually had to take into consideration the CO2 emissions that from throughout the end-to-end process of manufacturing those components you're using.
So I know Europe's super progressive with that stuff. The US depends who's running the show at the moment. But how do you see that take up in I guess APAC, and that's very big. I mean, Australia and New Zealand, China. I mean, that stuff's mostly being driven out of Europe, I assume.
Well, it is, but at the end of the day, it comes down to OPEX, operational expenditure, in terms of how much it's costing you to run your data centers and to run all that compute power and everything. And it's interesting, contrary to a lot of beliefs today, where I've spoken to customers where they think they need to be able to run their computes at 100% to get their return on investment, but without realizing that that some of the research is showing now that if you run at a more sweet spot in terms of load on the CPU, you can reduce your power consumption to the point where it's a lot more cost effective in the long run than to have, say, two rather than one, and being able to manage your costs that way. So I can see, even though there might not be the reporting requirements yet in our region that I've heard of personally, but there may be some on the way. There's definitely benefits to be gained for anyone running large data centers like that in terms of OpEx.
So perhaps in future we'll start to see this as another angle on total cost of ownership, eh?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I'll make the call here now. CNCF in Amsterdam. Here it comes, right? You ready?
Yeah.
This is going to happen here on the Hybrid Cloud Kopi Hour second beta edition. They will have a guest speaker. You know who it is? It's going to be Greta Thunberg. So she'll come in and she'll talk about the environmental advantages of using Kubernetes. And that, I'm just telling you now. So I'm mark your calendars. Get ready to see Greta. She's going to sort this out for us. And because she can get there, right? She can get the train over and all that kind of stuff. She doesn't have to do the boat trip like she did before. So I'm a huge fan of her. So I'm not mocking. I'm telling you, CNCF, you heard it here first. Bring in Greta.
I think it's a great thing. I mean, although it's early stages, everyone's taking notice, and like they say, like crossing the chasm. So once it's kind of taken flight and people see the benefits, other regions will kind of follow suit. And I'm quite positive. I'm quite hopeful that happens because it's important.
But the telemetry that's coming out and the real data, it's definitely changing. Contradicting a lot of sort of traditional thoughts in how things should be.
Just to go on a brief tangent, there was actually another talk I did manage to get to, which was actually covering Kubernetes at the edge for a deployment in South Africa to help with the ongoing kind of energy situation over there. So for anyone that isn't kind of familiar with it, essentially there's rolling blackouts and brownouts in various areas. And there was a talk from someone that had deployed Kubernetes at the edge for smart metering. So that was really cool to see, and I think we should see more of it, I guess. Yeah.
I think edge is going to be so relevant in Asia and in APAC. Our scale, Nick, you've educated me on this a lot, but the scale of what we're dealing with and the size of what we're dealing, like the people, the amount of people in these areas need to deal with things right up to the front there. So I think this is very exciting for APAC.
And it's for everywhere. I mean, especially with 5G as it gets deployed, it'll give the ability to be able to move the processing closer to the edge with lower latencies, to be able to run your autonomous farming machinery, to be able to run your autonomous mining machinery, and possibly, there's a lot of car companies investing in this as well, to be able to run, telemetry data from cars as they're moving along the highway and everything. I think we're still a bit way off in autonomous driving. There's a lot more probably.
It's another show.
Another show, and more. I think there's more legislative and legal challenges than the technical with that side of things. But definitely with 5G rollouts, that ability to be closer to the edge will be a reality.
Yeah, no,
and what's the killer app going to be? Come on, people, you have to come up with a killer app.
Yeah, well, and this is what I think is so cool about making sure that people in our region are at these events. Like you said, James, it's worth targeting getting to Amsterdam, however you do it, whatever, you can, because we have these conversations and we bring these ideas back with us, and companies and decision makers bring these ideas back, because it's so much more real, as Dev was saying, when you're in that room with people and actually, seeing the faces behind the projects and understanding that the motivations and how they're happening. So I think it's neat that you guys can come over, come on and share it. I know it's only been a week, so you're probably still a bit jet lagged and avoiding various nasties in the air from, all the travel and all that kind of stuff. So it's really appreciated that you come on. So if you have go around the room one last time, we're right at the end. If you have any final words, if you don't, that's fine. But if you wanted to add anything else, please go ahead, James.
Well, I just actually had one other very cool, very short story to tell, and that was actually on, I think I was on Wednesday, sitting down to lunch. So the hall is enormous, and I just happened to pick the table. One other guy sitting there, and who would it be then? One other than one of our CoreOS core maintainers, from Red Hat, and we get talking about a customer issue actually, for a New Zealand customer.
As you do.
And later that night, I sent him a support case that we've been talking about, and this absolute legend replies back about 20 minutes later with a GitHub pull request for something that'll prevent that situation ever occurring again in future. And it's just those kind of things that are awesome about those events like this. So
Nice
bring
story.
on more of it. Yeah.
No, exactly. You're talking with the maintainers of the projects and the developers. And I mean, Dev and I had some discussions with the Kiverno guys about some challenges I'm having with some of my GitOps automation, and said, "Oh yeah, he said, open up an issue and point it to me, and I'll have a look at it later when I have more time."
Yeah. And what's so wonderful about that is ultimately it helps the customers, right? Because you engineers, you're talking, you're geeking, you're over there, you're enjoying yourselves, you're doing crazy games like the capture the flag stuff, and it's all bringing everyone together to solve these problems and to get them solved quickly so that our customers can just take off with them.
And that's the thing. We all come from the customer-facing environment, and we meet these engineers, and and we can pass on that knowledge that we have. I mean, like I said, I'm dealing daily with telecommunications companies around this region, and even in North America and Europe as well. Dev's dealing with customers within Australia, James within New Zealand, and these developers don't necessarily get that experience, don't see how their products are used or what the challenges are. So
that's good. All right, Dev, I'm going to give you the last word. What was your favorite meal that you had when you were over there? He was sharing pictures on Signal with me of delicious food. So I'm like thinking about dinner already. What was it? Favorite?
Certainly loved American food, but I think the barbecue out there. We went to a Texas Brazil barbecue in Detroit. That was fantastic. I think that peaked it there. So I'll give it.
Yeah, I did try to go to that one, but it was booked out that evening.
Yeah. James, I love food stories. Did you have some?
Yeah, we went to this wonderful restaurant, Prime and Proper. I'll give them a shout out. Just amazing steaks. I mean, extraordinary. Yeah,
that's good. Cool.
But I have to admit, the costs of food has gone up dramatically since last time I was in the US in 2015.
Yeah.
Definitely, you've noticed a lot more than in Australia that the prices have gone up.
I imagine. That's again another show. So I'm going to wrap us up here, guys. We've made it. I could keep going. We made it to an hour. What I do want to call out is that you can follow all the Red Hat live streaming at the calendar that's located there. There's lots of good shows. Most of them are in US times. So if you're rewatching the stream or watching live today for APAC timing, we're your show. And reach out to me. I'm looking to bring in as many people from around our region to share our stories and to share our experiences, like these three have done today. I'm sure you'll see them again on the show. So thank you everyone for joining us. And I suppose we'll get ready for the Amsterdam recap show that's in April, right? So first week of May. We'll make a thing out of it. And I can pick a different background. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for your joining and tending, and we'll see you next time for a nice hot cup of coffee. See y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.